All right, we're going to read 247 to page 251. Who were the gods? Who was man? The Greeks loved to tell stories. The Iliad and the Odyssey were some of the first tales. These great poems, told by the poet Homer, show the Greeks in the heat of battle and then finding their way home. In these stories, human beings are often tested by willful gods and pitted against each other. They can rely only on their resourcefulness and sometimes on the aid of a friendly God. Greek myths about their mighty gods and valiant heroes still fill us with wonder today. Let's read one of those myths. It holds some important clues about the ideas of the Greeks. Okay, Prometheus and the gift of fire. Long ago, there was a giant named Prometheus. Prometheus did not care to live among the clouds high on Mount Olympus with the gods and goddesses, who spent their time drinking nectar and eating ambrosia. So he went among men to live with them and help them, for his heart was filled with sadness when he found that they were not happy. They were the most miserable of all living creatures, hunted by wild beasts and by one another. They were poor and wretched, living in caves and holes in the earth, dying of starvation and shivering with cold, because there was no fire. If only they had fire, said Prometheus to himself, they could at least warm themselves and cook their food. And after a while they could learn to make tools and build themselves houses. Without fire they are worse off than the beasts. Then he went boldly to Zeus, the king of the gods, and begged him to give fire to men so that they might have at least a little comfort in the cold and darkness. But Zeus replied, I will not give them even a spark, no indeed. Why, if men had fire they might become strong and wise like ourselves, and after a while they would drive us out of our kingdom. Let them shiver with cold and live like the beasts. It is best for them to be poor and ignorant, so that we, mighty ones, may thrive and be happy. Prometheus made no answer. He had set his heart on helping mankind, and he would not give up. He turned away and left Zeus and his mighty company forever. As he was walking by the shore of the sea, he found a reed growing. When he had broken it off, he saw that its hollow center was filled with a dry, soft substance that would burn slowly and keep burning a long time. He took the long stalk in his hands and started with it toward the dwelling of the sun far to the east. Mankind shall have fire in spite of the tyrant who sits on the mountain top, he said. He reached the place of the sun in the early morning, just as the glowing golden orb was rising from the earth and beginning its daily journey through the sky. He touched the end of the long reed to the flames, and it caught on fire, burning slowly. Then he turned and hastened back to his own land, carrying with him the precious spark hidden in the plant. He called some of the shivering men from their caves and built a fire for them and showed them how to warm themselves by it and how to build other fires from the coals. Soon there was a cheerful blaze in every home, and men and women were warm and happy, and thankful to Prometheus for the wonderful gift he had brought them. It was not long until they learned to cook their food, and so to eat like men instead of like beasts. They began at once to leave off their wild and savage habits, and instead of lurking in the dark places of the world, they came out into the open air and the bright sunlight. In time, Prometheus taught them 1,000 more ways to improve their lives. He showed them how to build houses of wood and stone, and how to tame the sheep and cattle and make them useful, and how to plant and sow and reap, and how to protect themselves from the storms of winter and the beasts of the woods. Then he showed them how to dig in the earth for copper and iron, and how to melt the ore, and how to hammer it into shape, and fashion from it the tools and weapons they needed in peace and war. Things might have gone on very happily indeed had it not been for Zeus. One day when he chanced to look down upon the earth, he saw the fires burning, and the people living in houses, and the flocks feeding in the hills, and the grain ripening in the fields. This made him very angry. "Who has done all this?" he thundered. And someone answered, "Prometheus." "That insolent giant!" he cried. "I will punish him." He commanded two of his servants, whose names were Strength and Force, to seize Prometheus and carry him to the topmost peak of the Caucasus Mountains. Then he sent Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, to bind Prometheus with iron chains and fetter him to the rock so that he could not move hand or foot. Epictetus did not like to do this, for he was a friend of Prometheus, yet he did not dare to disobey. So the great friend of men, who had given them fire and lifted them out of their wretchedness and showed them how to live, was chained to a mountain peak. There he hung, with the storm winds whistling always around him, and the pitiless hail beating in his face, and fierce eagles shrieking in his ears and tearing his body with their cruel claws. Yet he bore all his sufferings without a groan, and never would he beg for mercy or say that he was sorry for what he had done. All right, that's the end of the myth. Now, armed with reason. The myth of Prometheus was a favorite among the Greeks. Prometheus, the giant who brought the gift of fire, and with it warmth and light and progress, was a great hero. But human beings and the resourceful ways they used fire were victors as well. Surely the Greeks thought men were not as great as gods. Humans had to honor the gods with temples and statues and special offerings. If human beings presumed that they were as great as gods, then, said the Greeks, they were guilty of hubris, or unacceptable pride. But the myth of Prometheus showed that human beings did have a very special gift, a gift symbolized by fire. Just what does fire stand for in the myth of Prometheus? What was this special gift that separated man from all other creatures? The Greeks believed that man's special gift was his mind. The Greeks saw human beings as thinkers and problem solvers. Their minds, like fire, lit the way. With thought and reason, they could take the gift of fire and set it to work for them. They could look at the world around them and figure out how it worked and how to make good use of its treasures. This was perhaps the most important Greek idea, that when people use their minds and reason, they can understand much about the world around them. Unlike many other ancient peoples, the Greeks rejected the notion that humans are nothing but slaves to the gods. The Greeks came to believe that there were three important things they could understand with their minds: the workings of nature, human nature itself, and the best ways for human beings to live together in communities. And let's see, this next part is going to start with tomorrow's lesson, but here we also have the Greek gods and goddesses on page 251. And so you can read about all of the different Gods and goddesses. The early Greeks believed their gods dwelt in splendor on the craggy peaks of Mount Olympus in northern Greece. There they feasted on ambrosia and nectar, quarreled, laughed, and got involved in the affairs of men. The Greeks believed that the gods and goddesses sometimes came down from Mount Olympus to walk among people on earth, helping those they favored and punishing the wicked. Their help might come in the form of a gift, such as strong armor and a sturdy shield, or a solution to a problem. Punishment might mean turning a person into an animal to teach him a lesson, or causing a storm at sea to drive a hero's ship off its course. In the Greek myths, a god or goddess could be a powerful ally or a terrible foe. And then here, take a look at all of the different gods and goddesses here. All right, and that is the end of the reading for pages 247 to 251.